Hey everybody, I have a video here for you today. We're going to stick with ancient America, and this is truly lost history. Now I have mentioned some of these mounds. The material in them seems some of them had clay that was burned, some of them had a layer of stone. But were some of these actually stone pyramids? Well, none of them that I have mentioned so far seems to be a stone pyramid. Some of them had layers of stone in them, and I mentioned that, especially the Miamisburg Mound. But what I found last night, well, seems we had a stone pyramid right in the middle of Ohio, and it was removed and never really mentioned again. Let's go down to Buckeye Lake, it is called today, and the name of this has changed a couple times. It was known as the Big Swamp originally, and then it was known as the Licking Summit Reservoir. I believe that was the name of it. And today it is known as Buckeye Lake. Pretty good sized body of water. But the history here seems to be about 200 years ago. They needed a bigger water source for the Erie Canal. And here, I think it flows from the bottom of the screen here. Built about 200 years ago. So what they did is they built quite a good size dike right here, or a dam, and that's what formed this reservoir known as Buckeye Lake today. 200 years ago, this was quite a project. I guess there was some controversy here about 2 or 3 years ago where a report was put out that really questioned the stability of this 200-year-old dam or dike or whatever you want to call it. So I was just doing some reading and I was shocked what I found. Now, when I was looking around YouTube last night, some videos popped up for the Erie Canal, and that comes from about 200 years ago. And I was just generally familiar with the Erie Canal, but what I really noticed, I was just looking at a few things that popped up. But the Erie Canal was built in the same region as some of these so-called Adena or Hopewell earthworks, and it's just south of I think the famous Newark earthworks. But here is a sign that comes from the Licking Summit area, and this really caught my eye. It says, digging out of the Ohio Erie Canal began in 1825, and the first canal boat navigated the deep cut at Licking Summit in 1831. The canal going north to Coshocton and south to Circleville. So they were building this canal in this area of the earthworks before a lot of the research on the earthworks was done, so I just thought I'd look into this Erie Canal. And what did they find anything building this? Well, now here we are. This is the very east side of the lake, and reports had a series of mounds about 1 mile east of the lake, so somewhere, I'm guessing, in this area. And there are a couple sites that look possible, but just traces of this site remain today. And what was found here, something that is totally unique to the ancient United States. Here is a diagram of what was found here in the early 1800s. This was done in, looks like 1838, and this was done by a Charles Whittlesey, and he is the same guy that kind of poo-pooed the Grave Creek stone or tablet that was found. Well, here he kind of rewrites ancient U.S. history by diagramming a pyramid that went 57 feet high. And people say, well, only 57 feet high. Well, that's pretty high and that's pretty tall. But reports had this about 57 feet tall. And that's a pretty good sized pyramid. And if it has a base that big, well, that contained a heck of a lot of stone. And this is really the only stone pyramid report we have that was actually documented as a stone pyramid, not an earthen mound. And this was totally removed. And what they used the stones for building that dam or dike 200 years ago. That's where this pyramid is today, holding back water of that reservoir of Buckeye Lake. So I just wanted to read any other reports, and this comes from a J.P. McLean in 1879. Perhaps the largest and finest stone mound in Ohio, and that's like hinting there was others, was that which stood about 8 miles south of Newark and 1 mile east of the reservoir on the licking summit of the Ohio Canal. It was composed of stones found on the adjacent grounds, laid up without cement, to a height of about 50 feet, with a circular base of about 182 feet in diameter. It was surrounded by a low embankment of an oval form, accompanied by a ditch, and having a gateway to the east. When the reservoir, which was about 7 miles long, was made, in order to protect the east bank so that it might be used for navigation, the stones from this mound were removed for that purpose. During the years 1831 to 1832, not less than 50 teams were employed in hauling them, carrying away from 10 to 15,000 wagon loads of stones from this pyramid. But a 57-foot high pyramid that had a diameter base of 175 feet or so, as it was described in a few different articles. But this seems like a pretty large pyramid. 50 teams, maybe 10,000 trips, wagon load. Obviously, they wouldn't be able to put a whole lot of tonnage on a wagon from 200 years ago. But the fact that they made 10 to 15,000 trips and had 50 teams of workers, and that this pyramid was big enough to supply stones, it was worth it for them to haul stones from one side of this present-day lake to the other to build a dam 200 years ago. This must have been a very good size stone pyramid, and I'm not sure if this drawing is totally accurate, but it's a stone pyramid coming from the middle of Ohio. This event marked the beginning of the canal's construction that would take 7 years to complete, connecting Lake Erie with the Ohio River at Portsmouth. The engineering of the canal required the use of rivers where possible and channels dug where they were not. In many locations, feeder lakes were constructed to provide enough water to keep those channels filled. One of those feeder lakes was constructed south of Newark and was known as the Licking Summit Reservoir. It says, as construction on the Licking Summit Reservoir progressed, it was decided to protect the east bank of the reservoir from erosion, required a layer of stone. From 1831 to 1832, up to 75 wagon teams were assembled to move the stone from the giant stone mound to the east bank. It was estimated that between 10 and 15,000 wagon loads of stone were carried away from the mound. It was a massive structure of some great importance. As they were removing the stones, it was discovered that the stones were covering 16 smaller mounds of earth around the outer circumference of the mound. Once the stones were removed, the exposed mounds were left alone until 1850, when some local farmers dug into one of the mounds and uncovered a burial site and a number of artifacts. The burial site was covered with some remarkably preserved logs laid side by side, creating a wood slab. One of the farmers noted that the cut marks on the trees as being accomplished by someone with extremely sharp tools, and not stone axes, as was believed. Some of the wooden slabs was forwarded to the university. In 2015, a local archaeologist, Bradley Lepper, acquired a small sliver of wood for carbon dating. The results of this testing indicated the tree was cut down around 130 AD, so that gives you a possible date when these mounds were built, about 2,000 years ago. But here, Touring, Ohio has a story on the stone mound. I'm just wondering if any of you in Ohio are familiar with the stone pyramid. Now this drawing of Charles Whittlesey, and he's the one who discredited the Grave Creek tablet. Well, this is how he diagrammed the mound, but other people say that this mound was built of uniform blocks of 40 to 60 pounds apiece, and it took 10 to 15,000 wagon loads to carry away this pyramid. I'm questioning what the accuracy is of Mr. Whittlesey's drawing here. But I have mentioned the possibility that some of these may have had a stone facing at some point in their history. But here we seem to have a stone pyramid that was made pretty much entirely of stone. Now I was reading a book by a Barbara Mann, and she calls this the Flint Ridge Stone Mound. And she said there was also another stone pyramid near Jasper, Ohio, that was made with 150-pound blocks that was dismantled in 1902. And I guess that's just something I'll have to look into, because you really have to look into each of these stories individually to see if there's any truth to them. This was documented by multiple sources, and this stone mound was certainly there on the east side of a current lake called Buckeye Lake. These stones were used to make a dam 200 years ago that in the meantime has been improved. Now, I have had some questions. Where does the name Hopewell come from? I mentioned in a previous video the name Adena came from a plantation. That was the name of the plantation of Ohio governor. So we really don't know who these people were. The name Hopewell, where does that come from? Comes from the name of the researcher who noticed similarities in the artifacts of these mounds. His name was Hopewell, so this culture just got the name Hopewell. We have no clue who the hell these people were, where they came from, where they originated. And the history of the United States is seriously inadequate, flawed, and incomplete, probably for a reason. Now here is a website, I will leave the link below, but this just has the citizens discussing the Buckeye Lake Dam situation. And it seems the dam was originally built about 200 years ago, and then there's a newer, modern dam here. But do you hear about that pyramid being disassembled for the original construction of the original dam? Well, of course not. Do you hear about that pyramid being mentioned anywhere except these reports from the 1800s? Well, no. And that's exactly why I mention it here today. But 200 years ago in Ohio, they were dismantling a stone pyramid to reinforce part of a dam or dike. This is the history of Ohio. Any locals want to add anything or correct anything to this hurried research, please do. But I thought this was fascinating. But this is something that I wanted to talk about. Seems we had a stone pyramid right in the middle of Ohio, and it's verified. They took it apart 200 years ago to build a dam. I think this is hugely important. Hope you thought this was cool, and you all have a very nice day.